Okay.
Yep.
Uh, Hey everyone, welcome to our first invited talk of the day. We have with us Tarun Pothulapati. He's an engineer at Buoyant, where he is working on Linkerd as part of his day job. Linkerd is an open source CNCF incubated service mesh project. He also spends his time contributing to various other smaller OSS projects. Recently, he has been very interested in Rust and networking. He has been trying to not only work on fun projects but also contributes to open source in the Rust ecosystem, such as tracing, etc. Apart from work, he also enjoys running and cycling. Today, he'll be speaking with us about the framework for building a FOSS project. Tarun.
So hello everyone, my name is Tarun, like Kaustubh said. So Kaustubh already used the only introduction that I have, so I guess we can go with that. I don't have any, so I don't have anything to add there. One tidbit to add is that so I started working on Linkerd through Google Summer of Code actually. So I started out my internship as an open source project and then continued doing that. So I also get to do open source in my day job, which I think is pretty awesome. So I'll share my screen now first. So can you folks see my screen? The PPT, essentially.
Yep.
Sorry. Uh, uh, so first of all, real kudos to everyone at the FOSS Hack, and the FOSS United Foundation too. Like you're doing awesome job, like essentially like pushing and supporting open source like from India and to the world. So I think which is awesome and which I think open source needs a lot right now. So kudos to you all for volunteering on all these things. So let's start with the talk actually. So when Devdut and others like reached out to me about the talk, initially we were planning to do an intro about my work, etc. But I thought it wouldn't be as interesting, right? Because there's only so much you can tell about your work and about yourself or introduction about open source or what you have done. So I thought maybe I could do something a bit different. Initially, we also thought we could maybe do a tech specific thing, but I thought because the theme of the hack is more like a general FOSS thing, right? Like nothing specific to a tool, a use case, etc. So we thought maybe I thought maybe what if we could do a talk on general like building out a FOSS project, right? Because a lot of the FOSS projects happen magically. Like at least they did. Like previously, you thought like someone thought it was a good idea to build some idea on the internet, and then the momentum took it away further. So maybe I thought like what are the common things, right, that an open source project has right now, and what are the reasons like why some open source worked out or some didn't. So I thought maybe we could have a framework around that, like what all things are there, like what all you have to do for a project. So it's just like not only doing stuff but just like knowing what all things, like when you sign up for an open source project like a successful one, you're signing up a lot of things like unknowingly maintenance. There's a lot of things like that you're signing up for. So I thought maybe we could dive into all the things there, and we could maybe talk about tools that help you there and things like that. So this talk is essentially that. So obviously there's no one way to do anything like just in life, like just in a startup or anywhere. There people have done it variously. People will do it in a various different things. So there's just like a framework that you have to take away, and just like any technical framework, there's always trade-offs. There's no single golden path. So keep that in mind. So these are all taken away from my experiences. So I'll give a short intro because Kaustubh already did it. So my name is Tarun. I work at Buoyant, who are one of the sponsors of Linkerd. So Linkerd is a CNCF incubated open source project. So I started out my technical journey, like career in open source, actually with Google Summer of Code on Linkerd itself, and then I continued working on it. And then one of the sponsors of Linkerd thought it was a good idea to hire me and let me work on Linkerd, which is pretty cool, I think. So that's on the work side. So I primarily write Golang and also bits of Rust here and there because the Linkerd proxy is written in Rust. There is some Rust stuff that we have to do here and there. Apart from work, I really enjoy running and cycling. Like I've been doing this uh, from the last 2 months, and it has been very relaxing. Uh, so I'm from Hyderabad, also India. So it's a good day out here today. Very cold actually for Hyderabad, not in general. So let's dive into the talk. So the agenda here is that we'll start like the framework of building an open source project includes a lot of things, right? So let's see like how do you select a good idea, right? Like there are a lot of bad ideas. Like a lot of open source isn't taken away, but that doesn't mean that you have to not do open source. Like open source, so just like any other building thing, any other building a tool, right? You're not really building it for someone will use it or it'll give you money. You're just hacking it for fun, or you're actually wanting to do that, right? Like essentially building a thing over it and maybe earning your life on that. Mm. So for all that to happen, there are multiple things there. So first, we'll see the selection, like what all ideas work in open source, right? Like you don't have to do it like as I said, none of this is it's like concrete advice. It's just like takeaways from my experience, and then the aspects of building it. Right, there are multiple things while you have to handle while building it, and then we'll also talk a bit about maintenance. I know it's like a hard conversation, and there's been a lot of like talk about it on the maintenance burden. Like our maintenance is really responsible to like fix issues and take care of things, even when some of the users aren't really friendly and they're not understanding that it's not their job to do things in a way. So we'll also see some aspects of community building. Not a lot of not all the projects like require community building. Like there are some projects that would be really helpful to have a community around it. So we'll talk about that, and then we'll also have a really good conversation about sustainability. We'll mostly talk about the monetary aspect of sustainability and not the technical sustainability kind of things where you want to talk about the project maintenance, the feature writing and whatever. So we'll talk about the monetary aspect to it because that has been a lot in the news recently, and there have been some tools like that made noise and have seen a potential like solution for it. So let's get into that. So selection, obviously, right? When you want to build an open source project, it's important that it is some problem that you're faced, right? Essentially, like choosing something that solves a specific problem, and it's easy that we fall into like building a tool that is like the golden tool for every problem, and I don't think that works in open source because there will be always tools that are better than you solving a specific problem. So I think uh, at least initially too, right? When you're a single developer, it's always advisable to choose a single problem that and build a tool that solves that very well. Even better if you have faced that problem personally, right? Like recently, I built out a tracing tool that essentially takes out the metadata from GitHub Actions, right, from your CI, and then emits them as like the Agar traces. Like you can have this nice visualization on each, like how much each job took, etc. So essentially, that was a personal problem. Like we faced it Linkerd on understanding like which jobs are taking like a lot of time. Where do we optimize things? So I think like starting out from a concrete problem, right, like that you faced will give you an like an important perspective about the solution that you want to land at, right? Like I had to take a multiple decisions there on what to include and what to not, and then having faced that problem like gives you a really good perspective about that. So I think it would be really awesome if you could start with that, like essentially seeing where you it could be a build tool, it could be anything that where you face a specific problem and you thought maybe there should be a tool that does it better. So that's a great way to start building a tool, just like in life, I guess, like a startup or whatever. Mm. So and then one of the really other important things is like having the differentiation factor, right? Like obviously because in open source you have people building from all over the world, right? People are coming from different perspectives. There's always tool that already does the problem that you mentioned. Like essentially there'll be always some tool that did that, but that doesn't mean that you have to try building your own thing, right? If you see on the internet, right, there are a lot of popular projects that had some previous iteration by some person in some other form. So you're essentially that should never prevent you from building tool that is always one thing, right? So you have to, if you think that there's some differentiation factor, right? Maybe it could be your approach, the way you're solving that particular problem, or it could be performance, right? Like recently there has been a lot of lot of like like better perf tools that do the same job. They are faster because they use some data structure or something, right? So it could be that. It could be resource usage, right? Maybe you're building it. It could be resource usage or language. A lot of the recent open source tools that I've been seeing have a lot of the like maybe some tool but in Rust, and that worked out really well actually for some of the tools. So it's just that Rust is memory safe, it's faster. Maybe people have understood that and realized that there's a nice ecosystem around it. Maybe that could be that, or it could be just that maybe you thought some API client library didn't exist in your language of choice, or it was not ergonomic as you would like, or it could be or it's not so it's just a binding that is generated. Maybe you would want to have a better one, right? Like just having that is ergonomic and easier to use. That could do it, and you should totally attempt doing that. So I think that's the whole foundation about open source, right? You see some tool and you see that it's not working, and then you build a different version out of it from your own perspective, from your own usage, etc. And there'll be some other people who thought that was the right thing to do and then took it over or whatever, right? And trusted you and used it. So that feels crazy. Like generally, right? I mean, you're building open source, etc. This is all fine, but then you take a bigger perspective at it, right? Like someone thought it was a good idea to iterate it, and then it took it over, and then there are people using it, people loved it. There have been instances like that. So I think it's crazy, like how much internet allows you to do that, and we easily forget that. Like at least I do. So I think it's really nice to have that perspective. So let's now get into the next part. So now we have an idea selected, right? You have this idea, you thought it was a good idea, and you have an approach to it because you thought of it, right? Like this should be in this way and not in that way, or in some form, right? So then you start with that, and then now we have to build it, right? So this is the hard part, right? Like I personally had a lot, like many people, I think, had a lot of ideas in life, like generally, but then you'd obviously not implement all of them. You'd only implement some of them, I guess. So that's part of the life, I guess. So on the building side, obviously, some of these suggestions that I have here maybe could be seem like very simple to you, but I was really shocked to know some of these are not really done in some projects and whatnot. So obviously, the first obvious thing is to use version control, right? Obviously, because you're not writing like single project, you'd be iterating on it. You'd want people to know why you did something. So I think like using version control and things like that, right? Like the general hygiene things, right? Like version control and readme maybe and things like that are very important. Like especially for an open source project where you would want others to also use, right? Not just you. Mm. So especially actually the commit messages, obviously, if you are in a company and working on a project, you know this already, and that actually plays a way more important role than in open source, right? Because people are not, you don't have a stand up where you can explain things, and you should not do that too, even if you have that in your company. So make sure that your commit messages are pretty clear on why you did that, so that you can. This is all important because there could be some people who are wondering like, why is this in this form? So you can just send the link over of the commit message explaining things, etc. So it's nice to have like clear explanations and things like that. You don't have to be like really verbose kind of things. I think it's also good to start with GitHub. Like these are, I think now with the current way on how popular GitHub is, we don't even have to like mention open source has become like synonym of GitHub, I guess. So I think it's obvious that you'd go with GitHub, but it's fine if you have any concerns there and use any other OS code hosting services, etc. But GitHub seems to be the place where all of it is happening right now, with all the support that GitHub has also been doing on features, etc. Obviously, I think this is a pretty good advice for anyone. Build the most basic like MVP to test and validate. Like there's no like you should not be starting out with like building the perfect open source project ever. So make sure that iteration is what you're looking for, and then you're okay. So you start out with iteration, and from there, and you're having an MVP where you're testing and validating things, and then building on top of it, right? Also because you would want to have open source because you want to, because it's an open source project, etc., people expect a license, right, on the kinds of things that they're allowed to do and not. So if so I think it's an important aspect of handling an open source project, like choosing a license. You don't have to be like read all the licenses, understand, like hire a lawyer and understanding licenses, but feel free to add one, like at least the MIT one or something that goes with your values, something that goes with your values. So other thing is that the readmes and the descriptions, right, like having a way, the docs, the initial getting started docs are actually way more important than you think, right? Because the code is not the value here, right? The tool is the value. So if you don't have enough explanations on what the tool does, how it's different, the ways to test, run and deploy your application, I don't think like you can do that, and may the open source project still work out. But I think it's very good to have like the docs on initial running, etc., so that folks can use it and then create an opinion about it, right? Because you can't do any of it with just the code. Like if you can't run it, if you can't do it, and so. Also, that I think one of the things that I recently understood, like pretty much, is that it's always good to have some other maintainer along with you, like who you can discuss things. Like it's obviously a very hard problem, like finding a co-founder like this. It's crazy how hard it is, obviously. So I think it's good to have, but obviously you should not be waiting for someone to start some tool. People can come in meanwhile, etc. But if you have someone's, right, like for example, in the tool that I mentioned, I had colleagues where I was able to discuss about things, right, where they also thought that it was a problem, etc. So I think it's nice to have like perspectives around like to take correct decisions, to move it faster and things like that. So I think the building side of things, we're not really talking about the language, tool, etc., right? Because they don't really matter in the grand scheme of OSS. You can use anything. It depends on your experience on the tool and whatnot. So feel free to use whatever thing. I mean, I don't really even have to mention this, I guess. You can use anything or try anything. So now that you're on GitHub, you had this. You start building it and you're iterating on it, right? And maybe let's consider that people started using it. Wow, that's really awesome. So I think I would love to maintain projects where people are actually using it. Linkerd is like that, but none of my personal projects are any famous. I don't have a lot of them too. So I think it's really nice. Like at least the grass is, I think I'm on the grass is greener on the other side, and there's also this whole maintenance aspect that we'll talk about, and you should be people are worried about. Yeah. So we'll consider that people are using it. Maybe there are issues being created, there are feature requests that are happening and things like that. So let's consider that. Now the maintenance aspect of it, right? Like any tool that you created at your company, etc., maintenance is like a really important thing that it is nice to, if you're considered earlier, but also you can also learn it on the fly. But it's nice to have that perspective around like what all the things that are involved, right? So I think the first important thing that I'll tell you is that it's okay to say no to features that you don't think are important or not the right fit for the project. So I think this has been like this is obvious if you think about it, but in the implementation side, it's not as easy because there are users asking for it. They thought it was a right idea to have. They loved your tool and they now want this extra benefit, but you don't think that that's a right place to have, right? Because you thought the tool was this, there's a simple thing that does one job, and now there are people asking for it. So I think if you have that perspective, I think it's better to say no, right? If you don't think it's the right thing, because they're not just like writing code and the feature is there, right? There's like million other maintenance things that comes up. There will be issues on that. There'll be a lot of things on that. And if the other person who asked you to build is not there anymore, and you're the one who is like this, who has to worry about the maintenance burden of it. So I think it's important that you stick to the principles that you started out with, if you think that's right. And also the other thing is that if you think it's important and you don't have time for it, which happens a lot, right? In projects there will be 100 other things that people would be asking. There could be an addition of a nice progress bar, whatever, right? There's always a way to improve a project, but there's only limited time that you have, right? So I think it's important that if you don't think like it fits, you can ask them to submit a pull request. and stuff like that, right? You don't have to like you don't have to take it on your head and be like, this is, I have to do this. You don't have to take it like really really into you, like someone asked this and there's not a way to build that. So obviously, like asking them to submit a pull request is not as easy. Like, so, a lot of times some of them need help, right? To maybe they want they want to have they want you to help you build the tool. Maybe they want you to understand like the abstractions that you have or whatever, right? So I think it's not as easy like just asking them to submit a pull request, but I think it does its job. Like if they think it's important enough, they'll try to submit a pull request. And obviously reviews is a whole other thing that we have to worry about on the kind of things that you can do. So so hand holding helps actually. So what you could do there is that instead of doing anything specific for that person, try to move that as a documentation into the project, right? Like for example, if someone is asking a question, maybe you could document it instead, right? Instead of like answering them specifically in an issue, maybe you could have a readme doc or some section there on how to do things, so that you can point them out things. So it's a great way to like reduce burden on yourself for sure. Mm, Obviously the other part of it is that obviously if someone thinks it's important enough, they'll submit a pull request, and then there's this whole review time, right? Like PR reviews are not easy. Like for example, so I have a theory on this, that PRs will either take you 2-3 days to get merged, like maximum, or they'll take like weeks. There's no middle ground, right? Because they're crazy big, or they do this they do this lot they do this like it's really complicated. There could be million reasons, right? Like it could be complicated, or the PR itself is huge, or this or it's doing some changes that you don't really understand, right? It could be some dashboard, some things, right? So I think PR reviews take a lot of effort. Like it's not easy to do like just reviews or accept anything that works, right? Because then you would lose the same simplicity that you started out with, and then you're becoming a much more like a general tool. So I think it's important that you like documentation helps on the kind of hygiene that you'd expect on PRs, but it's not easy to enforce them, obviously. So I think there it helps, like having documentation, etc. The other advice is that it's easy to fall into this whole maintenance hell, right? Where you're not really building features, and there's a lot of incoming requests or whatever what are coming up. And a lot of times, right, if I'm a user, and I've seen projects where they're not active, or maybe so recently, uh, in a tool that I was working on, there was this dependency that was randomly erroring out. uh, and then so I had to submit a pull request for the dependency first, because I was able to fix it, and I did that. But now I can't really use that because there hasn't been a release actually. So I had to create my own fork and things like that. So I think so I personally have been being a maintainer, have understood that people have a lot more things to do, and I'm okay with not pushing them further. But I see, if you don't have a perspective like that, it's easy to assume things, and maybe be a bit more harsh on maintainers. So I think it's very mixed there. So there's not really, you can't really enforcing. So I think it's good to be, it's important to be kind in the open source world, and try to do things without having to without having to push things anywhere, right? Especially because like even in the PR reviews, right, it's important that you separate the work from the person, right? Like even for the maintainers, so if you think there's a problem with the review, if you think there's a problem with the PR, make sure that your problem is on the work and not the person. So it's important to make that a distinction, and make sure that it's the work that you're talking about and not the person. It's obviously very hard, right? Because we always associate our work with the people, with yourself, right? You are really proud of your work, I'm really proud of my work, and it's good to and it's not as simple to separate them. So I think there's a lot more human aspect than we think, like in this whole like handling issues, PR requests, etc. So I think it's important to kind enough there, both as a user and as a maintainer. And for a maintainer, it's important that if you have some documentation, maybe you can point them out, like repeated questions, etc. So that we don't really get like troubled because of the same requests or anything like that. Also I think I think being in like if you are at this part of the project, right, like having a lot of incoming things, etc. Programs like actually like Google Summer of Code or foundations, right, like the Cloud Computing Foundation can actually help actually. So if you join them, there's a bit of support that you can expect on the survey side. Like there's a lot of so if you are here, there's a lot more project aspects that are involved actually, like licensing, etc. So and you're not really, you may not be as clear as what you want, right? So maybe foundations actually help. A lot of foundations also give you like credits and a lot of stuff like that, right? Like the cloud credits where you can run things, benchmarks and things, CI, etc., right? So there's some support that they can help on the maintenance side. Also programs like Google Summer of Code are actually pretty useful, I think. Uh, so just like week ago, I mean 2 days ago, so Google Summer of Code is also now open to anyone, which I think is awesome and will open up a lot of opportunities there. So feel free to check that out if you are interested. So with programs like Google Summer of Code, right, you essentially have. So if you think there's some piece that has to be built, but you don't really have time with it, maybe you can have like a concrete documentation on how it should be built, and someone can do that for you, right? And they are also getting benefited with all the learning payment from Google and whatnot, right? So it's pretty nice, I think, on all the programs that are being done recently in open source. The other aspect of maintenance, right, it's the releases, because none of the tool will be used if it's not released, right? And yeah, and there's this whole version policy that you have to do, right? It could be somewhere or whatever, right? So it's important that you are doing like releases. But the aspect to it is that you signed up for writing a project, right? Not doing release and maintenance, right? So it's important that you have to offload this as much as possible. Like you should not be waiting a lot on the releases, etc. So you have to make sure that this works repeatedly. You don't have to like handhold the CI a lot, etc. So it's important that you take care of this so that you're not really worrying about this and not the tool itself. But there are really good things that are helping like right now. So GitHub has this whole GitHub Actions, like that has some free usage for open source projects, right? So you can have actions to run CI/CD jobs, and then even for actions, right, there's this whole ecosystem of jobs that you can use. For example, if you want to do an npm release, right, there's already an action package that you can use without having to like do things on your own. So there's a lot of like the ecosystem on GitHub Actions is pretty useful, and a lot of projects already use them and are benefited, even Linkerd. So you can use GitHub Actions so that you can have releases automated and you are not doing it from your PC, or you can have unit tests, integration tests that run on every PR, right? Like the check jobs or whatever. And also in Golang, also like just creating these binaries, right? I don't think you should be like building them on your own without a simpler abstraction, right? So things like actually like Go releaser, and there are other projects like similarly in other languages that actually help. You can use them, and they do a lot of the jobs. And obviously they would expect you to build tools in a specific way or things like that, right? Obviously. So use things like that, so that you can offload as much as this of the build maintenance stuff, and you worry about the features and a lot of the other interesting work, and not the burden of having an open source project. The other cool feature from GitHub is the GitHub packages. So you can host Docker images right in the repo. So I think this is pretty awesome. We do that already with Linkerd. So you can push Docker images, you can host npm modules, you can also have Rust crates, etc., even binaries. So I think it's pretty cool that you have this one place where you can have your code hosted, and then your release artifacts and all. So I think it's pretty cool, and I really like how much easier it makes, right, for the maintenance burden, because without that you have to have this external registries that you have to handle authentication on the release part. There's this whole other thing. So I think with GitHub, everything of all of that makes it much more easier. Also, you can have a mailing list where you can notify users about the changes, etc. I think it's not needed, but it's nice to have, and it's not a big job actually. You can just copy paste the release notes and send notifications to whoever are interested so that they can check it out. Yeah. So, so community, as I mentioned, as I mentioned right previously, there's a lot of projects like that don't really need this aspect of it, and they're running fine. So I think it's more of a uh, thing to have. If your project is like an ecos framework, right? That can have extensions built on top or a platform. Then there's this whole community aspect of it, right? Where you would want to encourage people to build stuff on top of each other so that the end user benefits, right? It could be some extensions for your framework, or it could be a platform. Like Kubernetes has a huge ecosystem of community, people building operators, people building things. It's crazy how big it is, and that's the case with many other communities. So one other funny thing is that I wanted to find an emoji for community that has like people playing together, but then I was able to find only people of this emoji where people are wrestling, which I think also kind of makes sense. So I thought maybe I should just keep it. so uh, so for community, right? So essentially, you're wanting for a place where people could interact with each other and build on top of each other ideas, use cases, projects, right? So essentially, you'd want to have a more like asynchronous asynchronous communication only, but more like a general, not like issues, right? With issues, you have to with GitHub issues where you'd explain like a specific feature request or a specific problem, and not really like interact. You can do that too, but I think if you want to have a much more active community on questions, resolving, etc., people have done communities for sure. So you can have this is obviously more useful for projects. Obviously, only useful, I think, like where you have like frameworks or platforms where people can build stuff on each other and stuff. Maybe you could have a platform like Discord for this. We use Discord at Linkerd, and essentially that it helps the maintainers talk or share code with each other. Like for example, when you have multiple people, right? It's important that you can have discussions on PRs, right? Like PRs are awesome. Like I don't think so. So this could be controversial actually. I don't think like the GitHub PR workflow, right? Like right now is the best right now. There's no like really synchronous, and as I said, right, PRs either take like two days to get merged, or they take like weeks. There's no middle ground. So I think having a way to where people can interact synchronously, right? That helps immensely. Like having a Zulip chat or whatever, right? Where you could have a thread where you're talking about like the specific PR on why you did what, etc. Instead of having to blabber on the PR, etc. So I think that's a great use case. Like to have a discussion place where you could do that, and community also plays a big role there. So it could be Discord, it could be GitHub discussions too. It could be discourse, mailing list, or whatever. So I think there are multiple ways to do it. You don't have to use any specific tool, and that does its job. And there are also there could be also obviously these places like these discussion places, right? A lot of times they're not very specific about your tool, and that's a good thing actually. People interact with alternatives, etc. So there's this whole like building things on top of each other aspect to it that works greatly. So let's so before I complete this actually, GitHub also has a new feature on building like roadmaps, right? Like for example, like every other release you would want to prioritize things because there's only like a number of things that you could build, right? So essentially you'd want to have a place where you could plan roadmaps, discuss about things. And there's this whole like GitHub also trying to do this. I'm not really sure like how good that would be. A Jira like thing for GitHub for open source projects. So I'm not really excited about it, but there are alternatives like trying to solve this problem, and you could try out different things and choose between them. Yeah. So this is a very hard problem, and obviously I think there are some solutions forming right now on this. So let's talk about sustainability, right? On the sustainability aspect of it for open source, right? It's really hard to. So once you have a project that is working out there and there are people using it kind of becomes a day job essentially. Like if it's essentially working out, and it gets really hard to prioritize between work and the open source project, right? So you would want to have a way to sustain the project. If you want, maybe you would also want to work on that full time. So there are alternatives being formed on that, and also, right? So the first 1 year, 2 years of a project, right? You're really excited about it because it solved a specific problem for you, and then now it took its own life of of solving like multiple other problems for very other users, and it's really hard to be excited about that because you're not the one facing the problem anymore. You're solving problems for some other folks. So the benefit is not really directly attributed to you, and you're now in this place where you're not really excited about building it, but you want to build it. People are asking for it, so I think it gets a bit crazy human like here. So let's talk about sustainability for that. So obviously, building sustainable open source projects is a very hard problem, and it has been a lot in talks recently, right? Because open source now is very important. Like in DevOps, in the cloud space, like open source is now the default in a way, which is awesome, I think. So now, if I don't think you are using any project that you don't really understand in your production environment. You would want to make sure it's open source so that you can build on it, you can understand the code, etc. I don't think like using black box binaries are those days are gone, I think. But obviously the enterprise maybe still be using it, so obviously, but I would not there are always alternatives now, and I would highly suggest you to check them out right now. like 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 just to be able to view the code is not really like the reason why you would choose open source, to be honest. Like obviously that's an important aspect of it, but others building stuff on each other, right? Like the tool will have feature parity, there'll be other alternatives that are coming up. Maybe the API is the one that you can trust. Like having like using an open source tool now has become like a very important thing right now, and I can't imagine it being the other way. So now that everyone are using it, but sustainability is still the problem, right? Because companies are still using it. They don't really have a way to pay them directly, and even if you want to pay them, maybe the company is adamant about it, or if they want to pay, they don't really have a direct nice way of doing that, right? Easier way. There's a lot of friction, right? Like paying anyone to, and they're not really hired at your company. So it's very hard on the bureaucratic aspect to it, but also on the finance aspect to it, I guess. Uh, but these days, actually, a lot of ways have been coming up. One obvious way that has been there for a while and has been very popular right now is your employer supporting it, right? And they can't do it like randomly, right? Just because they want to support you. There is obviously a concrete reason. Maybe they're using it like this happens a lot with the big cloud provider companies, right? They hire a lot of the JavaScript folks or folks from the ecosystem. They don't really sell the product directly, but then they have like this the cloud where you want to have this nice integrations for JavaScript. Maybe they are building a developer workflow. A developer ID, right? Where you'd have these extensions built on top of it. So I think big companies are doing some part, but they have to do a lot more. As you'd obviously expect, this is not enough for sure. And obviously on the smaller companies too, right? There are small companies that have, especially the ones building developer tools, right? They could be directly selling a product on top of the tool, right? Like for example, with Linkerd, Buoyant sells enterprise support and an abstraction over it, a tool that abstracts Linkerd. So it's nice to have maintainers that work coincidingly on the product, but it's obviously not as easy, right? In some cases, there have been cases where the company changing stuff on the on the OSS project itself, which I think is pretty wrong, and you have to make sure that's not the case. Thankfully, with Linkerd, that was never the case, and we have been coexisting nicely, at least at least till now. There's this whole rise in the new developer creator economy, right? I just wrote it. I'm not sure if there's a word for it on that. So essentially, like individual users or companies directly supporting the creator, right? So GitHub sponsors is actually a great way right now. So essentially, you can. So when you use an open source tool, there's also the person behind it can have a profile through which you can directly pay them like monthly or yearly one-time payment or etc. Right? So that so it's essentially you essentially want to support them, right? So this has been actually working out like pretty good, like at least for the initial start, right? I think it has been like 1.5 year or 2 years probably that GitHub sponsors has been. and there are some folks like who are earning like their full-time salary through that, which I think is pretty nice. So you can use GitHub sponsors or Patreon, through which users can support you. It's not as easy, right? You are maybe one-time payments are easier, but to have like a subscription model where users are paying like monthly, it's very a lot of it means that the user has to understand the trouble of maintaining a project. So I think we see that a lot where maintainers are funding each other. So because they understand the problem. So I think it's important that users also get the perspective of the work that is involved, right? So that they they support you through monetarily, right? Which is very important. There are also people earning indirectly, right? Not directly selling the product or not directly getting the payments from the user, but maybe they could be building courses on that. They could be teaching. Some of them stream on Twitch, and you can subscribe and support. So there are indirect ways to do things, right? Always. So this is the monetary aspect of it. The GitHub sponsors currently, I think the model is working pretty well. There are even big companies, right, like paying through GitHub sponsors, like Microsoft does that. I think where employers vote on which project to support. I think every company in the world should have this, where employers where they, I think there should be a fixed budget, and employers can choose, vote or whatever on the projects that they want to support, right, that they use internally. So I think that will be a great model on sustainability, where companies are willing to support the tools that they're using. So I think a lot of the organizations in the FOSS United does that, like Zerodha, etc., which I think is pretty awesome, and kudos to them for doing that. So I think we have a lot more work to do there, like employees asking to do that, employers also like being okay with doing that. I think we have a long way to go there, and I think we are on the right path at least. So this is just the monetary sustainability aspect of it, right? And there's this whole project sustainability on things, right? So after a year, maybe you're not as excited about the tool that you're maintaining, or you're just burnt out, or you've moved between ecosystems, and you're not really there for that. So I think this is whole sustainability on what happens when the maintainer doesn't really want to maintain a project. So I think like having others help that, and also I think in generally, right, it's okay to like archive a project. Like if the user wants to use, he'll use. Otherwise, they'll find some other alternative. It's okay to do that. I think because I think in the past, open source has been like growing exponentially, right? We have a lot more tools, and now we are seeing the burnt out side of it. I think we are seeing the more and more aspect of it, right? Where you have tools that are not being actively worked on, etc. So I think it's okay that there'll be other tools that will be popping up with unique ways of doing it. So I think it's okay that we archive things and move on with newer solutions, etc. So project sustainability is still something that folks are figuring out, and obviously you should not be worrying about it from the start. It's just an aspect of it that is coming up these days. When you want to archive a project and things like that. Yeah. This is also, I think, there's this whole security aspect of things that I haven't really like I had a slide about, but realized maybe I should add that. So with GitHub, actually, GitHub has this whole security aspect of things where you have like alerts. When you use a dependency that has a vulnerability, it will alert you and things like that. So I think security is also important, obviously. And now that with the whole supply chain buzz that has been happening, which has some very good real aspect to it, right? Because you'd want to have your binaries like clear with no compromisation there till there. And we have been seeing a lot more vulnerabilities these days than any other time. So I think it's important that you would also give a small thought about it on the pipeline, from your build to release pipeline, where where aren't there any security surfaces that people can take out. And also there's this whole action work jobs being taken over by this whole mining, GitHub, like Bitcoin mining or whatever, right? The cryptocurrency mining that has been happening a lot, which has been affecting open source projects actually. So there's this whole security aspect of it, that you don't have to like stop everything and do security, but you have to consider it, I think. So that's all actually. I know a lot of the talk was talking and there wasn't any demo, which was new for me. But I tried to share whatever experiences that I had. So feel free to ask any questions. I'm happy to answer. Or if you want, you can reach out to me on Twitter. There's my profile link to my bio, and feel free to DM me if you have any questions, or on the Linkerd Slack or anywhere. Yeah, that's all. That's for me.
Uh, hey Tarun, thank you so much for the talk.
Mhm.
So, do we have any questions on YouTube? So, if anyone has any questions, just put it in the chat box. So, okay, I do have a few questions for
Sure.
you. So, so not everyone aspires to work on open source full time.
Mhm.
So what was it that attracted you to that?
So one thing I forgot, right? Like in my personal journey too, if you have any questions, right, feel free to ask them. I'm happy to answer like the journey that I took or whatever, right? I'm happy to help you help you go through finding things or etc. So I think obviously like any other student, I started out with Google Summer of Code, right? You have this summer where you want to do like interesting things, build interesting stuff, and then and then Google Summer of Code happened, and then from there, like I haven't really looked back, right? Like most of the code that I've written like till now is open source actually, and it feels pretty awesome to have done that, where you have this where anyone can look at your code. It's fine. There's this black box that and anything. So I think that attracted me, and building in public, right? There's essentially building stuff on each other, like especially being part of this whole CNCF ecosystem, right? You have a way of this like big community there where people are building things on top of each other, etc. So I think that attracted me a lot, and it's like you're not really just at a single company. There's this whole ecosystem that you're part of on the macro level, which made it even more fun, I think. So I think that brought me into open source, like having to do full time, like at least thinking of like, oh, so if I get to do this full time, this would be awesome, and I jumped on the wagon. That's all. Yeah.
Cool. That's really interesting to know.
Yeah.
I had asked a similar question to the maintainer of Adonis.js. We had
Mhm.
an AMA a few days ago, and he had mentioned that about the part about creative freedom, that
Mhm.
in an open source project, the maintainer has maintainer it's to the maintain up to the maintainer what goes into the project and what doesn't.
Yep. So obviously, right? It's so with great power comes great responsibility. So I think you have to. There's a lot more responsibility aspect of it, but I think in general, right? Open source means that it's not just like writing code. I think that applies to a lot of our jobs too in at work. So I think you have to do, especially with open source, you have to do a lot more things. Like you could be answering questions from users. You could be doing a talk like this. So there's a lot of things like aspects to it, like not just like writing code that works and stuff. So there's a lot more macro aspect to it, I think. Yeah, sure.
Okay. So again, if anyone has any questions, do put them in the YouTube chat box. Mm. As part of your job at Buoyant, so do you just completely focus on writing code on or just on the GitHub part of just Linkerd, or do you
Mhm.
also go on sessions with customers of Buoyant and so
Mhm.
and have support training sessions
Yep.
with them? Mm.
So actually, obviously, right? Buoyant sells Linkerd support if you want it for enterprise, and we do some of them. So one thing that I thought was that, so essentially, there's a Linkerd team and a Buoyant team, right? Where most of them are the Buoyant team focuses on the selling of the product, building the abstraction that they want to sell, that we want to sell, right? And then there's a Linkerd team which are pretty separated, to be honest. But actually, what the Linkerd team also does is that so we also use Linkerd in production at Buoyant. So all the production things specific to Linkerd, the maintainers handle them, so that they have a perspective on like what's the maintenance aspect of Linkerd, like essentially upgrades and whatnot. So we are on the latest edge, and we upgrade every 1 2 weeks. So we also get a perspective on the maintenance aspect of it, that we could integrate into the project. A lot of learnings like came from that. So we also get into some of the customer calls actually, like you rightly mentioned, and so that we get a perspective. But we really try to maintain that the Buoyant side of requests stay in the Buoyant side. If the customer wants to build a thing on top, it will be a separate project for the Buoyant team. That doesn't that shouldn't fall into the Linkerd maintainer aspect of things. So it's really hard distinction, but we try to maintain. Yeah, we try to maintain that. Yeah. for sure.
Mhm. That is just a question building on the
Hmm.
sustainability
Yep.
part of the talk that you mentioned.
Hmm.
So because it may not entirely be possible to uh, just do
Yeah.
it by
Open
coding.
source. Yeah, for sure. For sure.
There are also I think Buoyant also comes under open core kind of models. Is that?
So that's a good question actually. So obviously it's very hard to answer obviously. So I don't think like we haven't. I think I think so. I'm not really sure on the correct definition of open core, right? Because the project like doesn't really. We don't really like sell anything that the project actually needs. Actually, it's more or less like if you see the kind of projects that Buoyant does, right? Most of them are specific to a single customer. Like there's no Linkerd aspect of it. Like if even if Linkerd does that, I don't think like a lot of people would want to use it, right? Like, it's just like a company that want to build 8 tools on top of that. So I don't think you could call it open core, but it doesn't match with the open core models that I've seen with Elasticsearch or etc. Because that's way different. We never had a licensing change. It's always the same. It has always been the same product that has been coming up with no licensing changes, with no stripping out components. That has never happened. Buoyant always did things that are specific to customer and things like that. Nothing has been taken away from Linkerd to sell outside. Yeah, that has been never been the case.
Mhm. Yeah, that's very interesting.
Mhm.
Mm. Okay, we had
Mhm.
a comment on YouTube. It says lots of open source implementations of Asana, Twilio, and Slack out there, which are with good UI and UX.
Mhm.
I guess this was when you were. This is referring to when you were talking about the differentiation aspect.
Yep.
So even
Yep. So even with enterprise tools, right? I think there's one tool from India that does like Frab. I don't really like don't know how to pronounce. Like Fortunate, I also had a job about it. So I think a lot of the I think enterprise solutions are not as great, and it's always nice to have like the open source implementations with better UI and things like that. So that's a great thing to have, and I've seen a lot of them like popping up recently. Even I think uh, with uh, with tools like Slack too, right? You have Zulip, the open source alternatives, right? That you can host on your own, use at your companies, etc. So I think that's a great thing. Yeah. Yeah.
yep.
Yeah, it's frappe basically, and
Yeah.
so I have a question for you, Taran. That
Mhm.
I mean, recently we saw GSOC actually open this their actually acceptance for anybody. So people
Mhm.
who are
Yep.
not even joining college can actually be part of that. So I mean,
Mhm.
a bit, and I'll go one step back. So
Sure.
how somebody can actually participate? I mean, I'm talking about a lot of beginners. So we have a lot of college
Mhm.
students participating in FOSS Hack. So what would you suggest for to them?
Yep, that's a great question actually. So actually, I mean, till now, Google Summer of Code was only for students, right? As a student, you had this summer or any other break, right, where you can do things and get paid, and you'd apply for projects, right? Like essentially, so I think before the timeline actually starts up, right? It's nice to have like contributions on the project. Right? Obviously, any open source project would expect someone who had done some stuff to work better than any other person, right? So if you could contribute to an open source project like before, I mean, it could be some just like small issues, like just bug fixes, smaller ones, or it could be some documentation stuff, etc. You can start with that and then take up incremental things, and then you have to submit so a proposal specific for the project, right? Like what they would want and the kind of timeline that you're planning, the features that you want to work on. So the proposal plays a very important part, and you have to make sure that you're talking to the maintainer and building it. Like a lot of times what happens is that you build your own proposal that takes a wrong step in the middle, and then the maintainer is not even, yeah.
I'll go one more step back. What you're explaining.
Uh-huh.
So I mean, there are very few colleges who has that ecosystem where people can actually
Mhm.
discuss. Okay, what how we should
Yep.
start fixing the bug. But I mean, there are colleges. I'm part of. I was part of a college where nobody have ever actually been to any GSOC. Okay, they have not even
Yep.
like been part of that. So I mean, I didn't even knew. Okay, I didn't knew that. When I was like almost in fourth year, I get to know. Okay, there is GSOC, and then there is college nearby called Modern Engineering College, and every year, a lot of people go there. I mean, participate, and then we are like, okay, it's already done. So I mean, we cannot even participate. So
So that's a good question actually. So I've been at that place actually. My college they didn't have any Google so any Google Summer of Code alumni that could have helped me do things. But what I really found out was that people are willing to help actually. So this is all voluntary work, right? Like I'm happy to be here and help some students who want to
when you
hack.
say people are willing to help, means who are these people?
Like general internet, right? Like so for
Internet.
example, yeah, on Twitter or whatever, right? Like if some student like reached out to me who is interested to contribute to Linkerd and who is showing some momentum, right? I'm happy to help them, like handhold them, do things like the simpler ones, and then they can take some bigger things. So it's important to ask questions and be present, right? Like otherwise there's no way that you could get an opportunity.
That totally makes sense. I mean, if you don't have a right ecosystem, you need to go to other places, which is internet.
Yeah, sure, totally. Yeah, you have to find your thing. Yeah, for sure.
Okay, yeah, thanks. This was something I wanted to get from you. Yeah, thanks. Anybody else have any question? I don't see any. Okay, I think it was nice listening to your talk, the way you presented about building a FOSS project, and you were talking about Frappe. So I use Frappe actually, and it's really nice UI. I mean when you see that, I mean I don't know how many of actually have really installed from the our FOSS Hack partner participant, but if you use it, it's really clean, really sexy. Yeah, there's that. Had some plus one.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think FOSS Hack website is with Frappe, right?
Yeah, we are using Frappe only. Yeah.
Yeah, that's nice. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you have to use it because it's a
And
positive.
it's really
Yeah.
powerful. Okay, I mean, it's very
Yeah.
simple to build anything now. Like if you have some idea about how to use Frappe. So
Yep,
I mean,
yep,
any
sure.
feature like we are keep adding on what we are building is like quite simple, and you just have to understand the I mean to go through the like framework, how the whole documentation once. I mean, it's really easy after that. So I mean, you can
That's
actually
awesome to hear.
yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, and we are like trying to I mean build something on top of that. So we are building a lot of applications like we are so at FOSS United we are building soft like a platform called Mon School to teach students programming and a community base as well with the apart from not just another course platform, online course platform,
Yep.
but a community driven like course. So that is actually completely built using Frappe. So I mean,
Wow.
and that's
That's
really if you go to Mon.school, you'll find okay, it's like, and it's very quick, easy to actually make some changes and deploy it. Like within some time. So yeah.
Yep, that's awesome. Actually, so a lot of things that like FOSS United is doing, right? Like monetarily and also the tools aspect of it. So I think it's all great stuff, and I'm really happy to be part of this whole conference and hack. Yeah, really excited for all the things that
So,
that you're all doing. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, please join to our group. Like FOSS United group and FOSS Hack Public. So maybe you can mentor some students there in case they have some question. For example, we just got one queries from first year or some college students saying that I have little knowledge about C and how can I start and which project I should. So maybe you can answer that, and that will.
So I think obviously, right? It's a very specific question, and it's hard for me to answer that. But obviously, right? I think you should start with like general building tools, right? Like just start out with any other tool that you would want and build experience on top of it, and then maybe you could also just start like contributing to an open source project, right? Like learning, for example, if you want to contribute to an open source project, there's some prerequisites that you have to understand, right? Like it could be the language that the project is using, it could be the framework that it's using, it could be the platform that it's aimed for. Like Linkerd is on Kubernetes, you have to understand some Kubernetes knowledge to run it on whatever. So I think it's important that you build some knowledge, some foundation skills, right, that are useful for not just for this project but in general. And then once you have that foundation, obviously no one can have the full foundation built Oh, perfectly. There's always the missing pieces that you would neglect or whatever. So I think it's okay, but having some foundation and then starting contributing, etc., is a great way to do things.
Good to know that actually, you really like, like what FOSS United is trying to do. You understand that. So, I mean, and we'll be happy to, have your little contribution in that as well. I mean, whatever way you can, maybe you can, help some of the beginners there, whenever you're free. Is there break in my voice?
So I think it's the internet that is unstable. Like,
Yeah. I mean, I believe that. So what I was trying to say that,
Yeah, now it's better.
I really, yeah. I understand that. I mean, we like that. You understand the idea of FOSS United. So in case you are like some free time, you can actually help the beginners. We have like first commit, which is being managed by Devdutt. We have like FOSS Hack group where participants are coming. Like beginners, most of them, and then want to learn something, and then some lot of queries, right, when you are in first year and second year,
It's
and
crazy.
want to do something,
Everything is
you want,
confusing now.
yes, lots of questions but nobody to answer.
Yeah.
And then you find that basically, I think your voice is breaking, David. Okay, let me just turn off my camera. I think that will fix half of the problem.
Yeah, there that you're saying something.
Yes, I was just mentioning that awesome contributors like Nabar, also like Gautam,
Wow.
and so many others have also been part of the FOSS United first program. They've been sharing their experience as contributors.
Yeah.
So maybe you will also find some interested people who want to learn about your experience. Maybe you can just do for one of the first commit sessions.
Yep. Yeah.
I'll try again. I'll join.
So yeah, so what Degal was trying to say that we have lots of people like Gautam, and Nabar and Pal, and then many other people, UV Panda, they are actually joining us, and helping beginners actually to learn, to get started to their commit. And we'll be happy to have you as well, like in general, you can join our FOSS United group and maybe discuss, and some ideas. So we keep, so as of now, we are also thinking about a program where we will actually fund as a reward, not as a grant, but some little reward to the beginners who are building something. Let's say you're building something for your college purpose, like mess management system, and you have like 10, 20 users and 1, 2 contributors. We'll give you like 5K, 10K, 20K rewards. So that's
That's really awesome.
Yeah.
So I'm just an email away and happy to get involved in any of these programs. Yeah. More than happy to get involved.
Yeah, that would be great. So we mostly, like do the discussion over the Telegram group that we have, and sorry for the noise. And we mostly, like once it is released, we need for the like some kind of suggestions, ideas from the community itself. And once the things are offline, we'll happy to have you next year as well as a mentor for coming hackathons and conference as well.
Yep. I'm happy to get involved. Yeah, for sure. It's
you
been a
so
while
much.
that I saw new people physically too. So I think that'll be a lot more fun.
Yeah, we'll probably, we are actually doing, I mean, we have not confirmed the date yet, but we'll be doing in February, of course, like if the things are like kind of smooth. But the current data, which is, doesn't seems like it is supporting
Yeah.
us. US and UK have getting more cases.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, happy to have you here, and then we'll happy to like get more contribution from your end to get the ecosystem get better in our country.
Yep. For sure.
Good to
Happy to
connect
get
with you.
involved.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, folks. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time, Tarun.
Yeah. So thank you all. Yeah. So I'm signing off, I guess. Yeah. So have a great weekend, everyone. Yeah. And a great hack. So I hope to see the results, I guess. Yeah. That's all.
Cool.